Hey, common scientists, we're coming to you this week with the topic of coffee. So, I know many of you probably started your day with coffee. Maybe you're sipping on it right now, but we're going to get into the ins and outs of coffee and a little bit also of the science of caffeine, some industry as well, and it's going to be an exciting and enticing time. Just a note for everyone. We are common scientists, meaning we practice common science. That means that we're not experts. We do research, bring it to the table, and do our best to cultivate some answers and understanding between the three of us. And we hope that you can learn from it too. So I'm going to kick it to Aidan to start with a quote about coffee.
So this is a quote by Benjamin Franklin. And it is, among the numerous luxuries of the table, coffee may be amongst the most valuable. It excites cheerfulness without intoxication and is never followed by debility. What does that invoke in the two of you common scientists?
And who said the quote?
Benjamin Franklin said it.
Franklin.
He is a big coffee fan.
Among the best things on the table, basically.
Yeah.
Coffee is one of them, he says, because you don't get hungover and it makes you happy.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the hungover part, but I do. I mean, there is something special about coffee, as we've kind of talked about just in passing and knowing each other. I've had my issues and my frustrations with and my differences with the idea of coffee and how we use coffee, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, yeah, in general, coffee or caffeine, among all of the drugs and substances and aid supplements, it does seem like it is one of the better ones. It does seem like, I mean, it's helped us to achieve a lot, as we'll go into in some of the history. And I know that around that time frame with Benjamin Franklin, coffee was relatively new in the Western world. So, I mean, yeah, that quote makes perfect sense. And I'm sure one thing too about that time and the founding of America. So one thing I didn't know is I always knew that a lot of the revolutionary meetings were in taverns and pubs and stuff like that. And I'd always assumed like it was around beer. But then in my research for this, it was saying like, oh no, a lot of these were actually coffee houses. Like there were taverns, and yes, they did sell alcohol, but they were going there for coffee. And one of the websites, or a couple of the websites and articles I looked at, were really stringing together a lot of how coffee was instrumental in, well, the American Revolution as well as the French Revolution and a few others as well. So coffee is also a very revolutionary drug, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I think...
Or a drink, I should say.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember which... I have no idea which king it was, but there was a king in England who tried to ban the coffee houses.
Yeah, who was that?
There was uproar. Because, I mean, it is... Because he was concerned about all the conversations going on at these coffee houses.
Yes. Coffee is inherently a revolutionary drug because it was like the drug of, or I keep saying drink. So you guys can tell.
Caffeine.
You can tell, right? Because usually when you're talking about coffee, you're usually talking about caffeine at the same time, right? Not decaf. And I have obviously tied the idea of it being a drug together because in society, we don't usually talk about it that way. We talk about it as a beverage, and we try to pretend like caffeine isn't a drug and it's not like all these other drugs, right? Of course, there's differences, but whatever. So if I say drug, forgive me. Beverage, drink, drug, etc. But yeah, it is by nature, or in the Western world, it is a revolutionary drug because it was a drink for the people and also for young people. And so to your point with that king, I know you were looking it up. I can't recall who it was, but they made this group, this kind of coffee club with like all these bright intellectuals, all these forward thinkers like Isaac Newton, Robert Boyle, Halley, the guy who mapped out Halley's Comet, all these really, really intelligent people. And of course, when you have the Enlightenment and the Renaissance and forward thinking, a lot of these people were not for the crown. So there was this king who was kind of like, oh, coffee is the demon, and we have these ideas with like marijuana too, where it's like we had that in America, where it's like marijuana's the devil, and you're like, oh, like you're like those are crazy presidents, like Nixon was crazy, and you're like, oh, this king was crazy, but he was right, like this coffee was very anti their system, very anti-establishment.
Yeah. So it was in 1675, King Charles II made an attempt, so it doesn't seem like he was successful, to shut down coffee houses with an edict. He stated that coffee houses have produced very evil and dangerous effects, and they were also disturbance of the peace and quiet realm.
I swear you could take that quote minus the realm part and like insert it somewhere in my childhood, and I'm sure I heard almost that exact thing about marijuana from my parents growing up. That it's like the devil's whatever it said.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Fascinating how, it seems like throughout history we choose something to demonize, a substance to demonize, whether or not it's like founded. But it seems with coffee, it might not be founded, I suppose, if it's been around for so long. We continue to drink it. And I think a lot of people now even kind of depend on it, which we can get into. It's a little scary.
Mm-hmm.
But how about you guys? Do you both drink coffee?
I, for the most part, don't drink coffee. It's not that I never do. Like, there comes a time when I might just grab like a espresso or whatever, and that is very specific in that it will be an espresso, because it's just like, for me, it's like a shot of vodka. It's like, I'm getting it out. Like, I'm getting it over with, you know? Give me the effects. I'm not here to sip on it, enjoy it, nothing like that. I just want the benefits. Same as alcohol. I don't think alcohol is good. And exactly, the caffeine benefit. So you will never ever see me like just sipping on like a decaf. Those people I can't even comprehend. No offense. I'm like, how is that possible? You guys drink decaf? Yeah. Oh my god!
I love the flavor of coffee. Yeah.
Oh my god!
Could drink. I mean, yeah. Right now we've got this French press that brews 2 cups every morning. So Lauren will have a cup and I'll have a cup. If it was not a French press and if it were something automatic, I would be drinking coffee all morning. I worked at one company that had an automatic coffee maker. Yeah. It was dangerous. I was slurping down cups on cups.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a routine for sure that every morning I'm having my cup of coffee, and then sometimes a good portion of the time I'll have an espresso around 10 or 11. Yeah.
Can't relate.
Which you don't down,
which you like sip on and enjoy.
Sip on an espresso?
Yeah, just like bring it in. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, that's decaf coffee with a little vanilla ice cream. That's one hell of a dessert.
Wow. I cannot even fathom. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of getting decaf coffee with a dessert to have something to kind of calm a sweet if I'm wanting like pie and decaf coffee. Phenomenal. Or ice cream or something like that. But
yeah, I suppose it kind of makes sense. Like, not you guys don't make sense, but I'm trying to figure out why I hate these things. I also don't like chocolate, which like whatever. What's the chocolate bean called? Is it just cocoa or is it cacao? How do they pronounce that bean?
I've heard both.
Whatever it is, like the cocoa bean or whatever, the origins of chocolate, and then also the coffee bean. They both they're pretty similar. And it makes sense because chocolate is also pretty bitter as well. Obviously, we just pump sugar into it, which we do the same with coffee. But both of them are pretty bitter, as well as beers as well. But I don't like those flavors. I've always thought, ever since a kid, that bitter does not taste good. And I think usually white kids don't really like coffee that much. So I never really grew out of that.
Here's a thought, and maybe one of you can look it up if I can't remember all the pieces, but did you ever do the experiment in college or high school with litmus paper, seeing if you were a taster or not?
I'm pretty sure we did.
Okay. So,
but describe it.
Yeah, I'll describe it briefly, but you guys might have to also look up. There are actually genetics, like there is coding in your DNA, right, that determines whether or not you are a taster for really bitter food items. And you can test it using litmus paper. And I don't remember the actual gene, and I don't remember if it applies to all bitter substances. But when I was in college, we did just a little pilot study or a little study on our own population. And we found a strong correlation for the tasters also not liking coffee. So if you're someone out there who's like, gosh, I just can't get over the bitterness of coffee, maybe it's because you're like considered to have the taster gene being turned on, which means you just are more apt to like tasting bitter things, whereas I am a non-taster. So maybe for me, coffee is experienced as much less bitter. Does that make some sense?
Interesting.
Yeah,
so
based on how you described it. Yeah.
some
Yeah.
people have a more heightened like sense of taste, is what you're saying.
A bitter taste, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I for sure enjoy. So it's interesting you draw the parallel with coffee, or coffee, between coffee and cocoa, because I definitely enjoy dark chocolate and then black coffee as well. So I've got kind of the parallel between the two.
Yeah, you have like dead
Going.
taste buds or something.
Basically.
Dang, that's so hard for me to comprehend. It's one of those things. It's always been one of those things for me where, you know, sometimes you can disagree with somebody, but like you can kind of understand. Okay, I kind of get it. Chocolate and coffee has always been one of those things I can't even comprehend. I'm just like, how does this taste good? It's so, I don't know, it's just so hard for me to. And what's another one? Like lutefisk too. Like there's just some of these like bitter, acidic, like these weird tasting things. I'm just like, how? These
Yeah.
are designed for you to like not eat them.
So literally, the litmus test, what I was just talking about, is a test for acidity or the alkalinity.
Okay.
Using litmus, and if you can, if you're a taster, then you're more prone to, like, you experience it in a much more heightened level, the acidity or the alkalinity.
Yeah.
And so it would make sense that I would bet you're a taster, right? Because you experience these things in a much more like visceral way, it almost seems. Whereas, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love dark chocolate. I really like coffee. Yeah, it's fascinating.
I also like spicy food. Does that play into it at all?
I wonder. I mean, obviously, we're just
Speculating.
Yeah, speculating. Whatever, just chatting. I also, like most of my life until the last couple of years, I've also hated spicy food as well. So I also have a high sensitivity to that. That seems like they wouldn't be that related, but perhaps.
Yeah, I would guess no, because spice is measured not in acidity or basicness, like it's measured in heat units, which is something totally different. And then what we're talking about, being bitter, is determined by the pH, or the amount of hydrogen in a substance. So
I'm just a sensitive guy, I guess.
yeah, I guess
Any
so.
sort of thing that just throw off my equilibrium, it's just like, nope, don't like this at all.
So when did you guys start drinking caffeinated beverages? Or specifically coffee?
Trying to think. In undergrad, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't drink caffeinated beverages in high school or middle school?
Nope. In undergrad, I also, it's funny, I made it, I think, through my first semester. And then I had been telling myself, the story I'd been telling myself was that, I don't need coffee. Like, coffee's for the week.
Yes. Yes. I love that story.
And then second semester, I had a paper due and left too little time to accomplish it without needing to stay up all night. And so coffee became my muse.
You were hooked.
I was hooked. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Pulled that all-nighter, and you were just like, wow.
Pulled that all-nighter, and I was like, this is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a very similar story, and we've definitely had a couple similarities throughout our conversations, Aidan and I. But yeah, pretty similar. I was just like, why would I want to be dependent upon something? I've always been able to rely on my own passion and will to push through things, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, in college, you're still at the height of your mental and physical capabilities, but the strain that you're put under with all the social things, sports, school, academics, et cetera, being at the peak, it's a lot more strenuous than most people have ever experienced. So, or like you've ever experienced at that point in your life, academically and stuff. So I went through something similar where I was like, no, never going to do it. Then I had a couple finals I was studying for that I fell asleep and didn't do so hot or whatnot. And then I was like, okay, let me try this coffee thing as a last resort. And it was still probably only a handful of times I ever had coffee in college, but it was like I was making the intentional decision. I can't make it through. I'm not gonna be able to push through this. Let me get that added boost. And I had to swallow my pride a little bit, but I was still raging against the dying of the light for sure. And I still am.
That's too funny.
I had a different experience. So I grew up as a pastor's kid, and that meant that I did a lot of social events with adults, including church, every single Sunday. And after church, there were always coffee and donuts offered, or coffee and cookies, something like that. And I, from a young age, felt a little bit aloof, like I was a good visitor with the old ladies. I still am. Better often at like conversing with adults, and like, yeah, older people than even people my own age. And I mean, it was the adult thing to do to have coffee when you had those conversations. So I started drinking coffee really young, really young. I couldn't tell you like how young I was. I started abusing coffee probably in middle school. So, yeah, I mean, it became clear that there wasn't enough like time in the day to do all the things. With 6 kids growing up, it was kind of nuts, and my dad was deployed at times, and so throughout middle school and then also through high school, drank coffee because I enjoyed it, and then I also probably drank coffee because I was addicted to it, and then I really overused coffee or abused coffee when I was consistently getting 2 to 4 hours of sleep a night for some periods of time when, I mean, my dad was deployed, and it was like I was wearing a lot of hats. I was like the second oldest, so I did a lot for my siblings, and then there was homework help, and then there might be like cooking, and then there's cleanup, and then chores are expected to be done, and so I might not get to my coursework, which almost all throughout high school I took college coursework online. I mean, yeah, I had nights where I slept for just a few hours a lot. So like, yeah, coffee was like married to my existence almost all throughout my childhood, really. And then college, I was so excited to be out from under my parents' roof because I think a lot of those pressures came, and the like lack of sustainability came from that situation, that my relationship with coffee changed because I was finally able to control my time. And so then I cut back on my coffee for a lot of the same reasons as you guys talked about, like, oh, I don't want to have to rely on this. And my most significant moment was when I got myself to the point where I could not drink coffee for a day and not have a splitting headache. So that was like, it just took a lot of time. And now I have like a cup a day and every now and then an espresso, but caffeine really affects my body. So I try not to do more than a cup a day, maybe 2, and not in the afternoon or I cannot sleep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Evolution of relationship, me and coffee.
Yeah.
We go way back.
Yeah.
But
yeah, mine's for sure been also fluctuating. So yeah, there were a couple of phases when I was deep into coffee, and one was I was in a summer internship in Rochester at Mayo, and there was this place down the street from the lab that the guy I was working with, my coworker, had identified, and it was $1 for whichever size of coffee you wanted. So for $1 to be able to get, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. But I was drinking
that's
like a big gulp of coffee. I mean, pretty much every day, because once I started on that train, I just would be dead the next day if I didn't have it. And the other time was when I was working in an office and there was just the automatic coffee machine right there, just steps from my desk. It was a big challenge because I was immensely dependent on it. But that all being said, so Voltaire, I don't think I've ever reached these levels. Voltaire, who's a famous philosopher, thinker, he would drink 20 to 30 to 50 cups of coffee a day. And he lived to 83 when an average life expectancy was 25 to 35 years. Yeah, and in the vein of revolutionism, I don't know if that's a word, but he was especially he especially believed that no institution should be immune to challenge by reason. It is better to risk saving a guilty man than to condemn an innocent man. Sorry, that was one of the quotes by him, but he was especially, or one of the pieces of him, he was interested in addressing the legal system and justice at large. But anyways, yeah, he drank immense amounts of coffee and lived to 83,
Wow.
which is wild.
So that's a lot of coffee.
That's a lot of coffee.
For other common scientists out there, I will throw out a recommended number. Now, this recommended number comes from Mayo Clinic, which is the #1 clinic and hospital in the United States, maybe in the world. I'm not 100% sure on that. So pretty reputable source. And they they say that you can have up to 400 milligrams of caffeine safely. And they say that that is about 4 cups of average cups, probably similar to the size I'm drinking right now of tea, not coffee, a day, which would be equivalent to 10 cans of cola a day. So it's quite a bit. So if you're at 2 cups a day and you're feeling weird about it, you're probably doing okay. But their article also did say that individuals can respond very differently to caffeine. So of course, consult with your doctor if you're worried about your coffee intake. Don't quote us for your own health. You have to find what feels good with an expert for sure. But that's what's recommend, or what's the limit, I guess.
Yeah.
100%. And to your point, yeah, biochemistry is very complex. So any sort of substance, just like food, right? Some people can drink milk, some people can't, some people can take spice, whatever. Biochemistry is really complex. So definitely that's just a rough gauge. Exactly. Now with that from Mayo, there was this umbrella study of 201 meta-analyses by Poole et al. And so I was, like I told you guys, and I'm still raging against the dying of the light. I've, for the most of my life, been a staunch, coffee, whatever, opponent. And one of the things a few years ago that got me to kind of, okay, maybe I can have it here and there. Okay, maybe I'm wrong, was I saw a slew of studies come out that were saying, okay, caffeine is really good for helping prevent Alzheimer's and helping prevent this and doing that and blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't have all of these sort of neurotic effects that some people might have been implying, or that coffee just seems to imply, right? It's like, okay, this seems like if you do this for a long period of time, you might develop some neuroticism, right? Yeah. Or something like that. And, there are some negative links at times. For example, I certainly would not recommend Voltaire's 50 cups a day. I'm wondering, that is such an extreme amount. How potent was that coffee?
Oh,
I know you don't know.
I don't know. I don't know how potent it was, but he had essentially a love affair with it.
Yeah.
He was notorious for not treating himself super well. So his supper would be 6 cups of coffee and a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
And that was...
No, I know. Yeah. In the Enlightenment movement and therefore after. And also, if you don't know Voltaire, an amazing writer and thinker, look into some of his stuff. I need to look more into him as well. Yeah. But I just know I mostly just know fancy quotes. I'm not some Voltaire fan, but he is a great thinker. So that's the only reason why we even mentioned him. That's why it's important that he was the one that drank this many cups of coffee, not just some random guy in the 1700s or something. Right. What were you to say, Lauren?
I was just going to say that when we were talking about how much caffeine was in his coffee, for those of our listeners who don't know, right, like depending on the way that you brew your coffee, also depending on the way that you roast your coffee beans, there can be a wide variety of caffeine that actually ends up in the cup that you're drinking. So too, the 4 cups a day could vary a lot depending on your technique and where you get your coffee beans.
Yeah.
Even going into, and I was going to even ask you earlier because you brought up fresh or French press, which most coffee drinkers probably know, but maybe some people don't know. I was going to ask you what are, besides just like the kind of slow burn of you not just slamming a bunch of coffee per day, do you know like the benefits or like the differences between like a French press and like a standard kind of pour through model or anything like that?
So I
Or either one.
know one of them, and that's that you can allow your coffee to steep longer than if you have a pour over, which are what most of like the modern coffee makers also are. Right, the water just comes and then steeps through automatically. But in a French press, you can allow your water to sit with the coffee beans for a longer period of time if you choose. So you can vary it. If you're wanting a lighter coffee, you might steep for a few minutes. If you're wanting a darker coffee with more caffeine content, you could steep longer. So that's one thing that I actually ended up reading about for this cast, but didn't know prior to.
Yeah, and in that steeping process, I imagine along with drawing out more of the flavors that are all in there, as opposed to if you're just pouring it in or through or whatever, you're just going to get whatever is readily available. You're going to steep more and more in the French press. So then you're also probably getting a more, like a higher proportion of caffeine per cup then as well, I would guess.
Yeah, I would bet. It probably depends on steep time, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it would depend on steep time.
Was Voltaire French? He might have been French. I don't know.
He
might have been getting the strong stuff.
He might have been drinking the strong stuff. Yeah, that's too funny. Yeah, I think, I mean, it depends on the steep time for sure. One of the cons of the French press and why it's not super common is that it's difficult to clean, and that's kind of aside from the caffeine debate. But yeah, so that's one of the cons for all you common science listeners out there.
Speaking of the caffeine debate also, though, and we're kind of going back and forth a little bit, but
Yeah,
I think it's important that we do mention you can overdose on caffeine as a drug. So there is an amount of, like, especially if you bought caffeine pills or caffeine powder, and I don't remember what the amount is, maybe we can look it up, but there is an amount of coffee that, or not coffee, of caffeine that if you consume, you will die. Like, it is lethal. So while if you're drinking coffee, you're probably okay, right? Voltaire had tons of coffee in the day. If you're taking caffeine pills or caffeine powder, that's a whole different story, and it depends on how concentrated it is and all sorts of things. But think back to that recommendation. 4 cups, they equate to about 400 milligrams. So you'll have to check out your label if you do have caffeine pills or caffeine powder. But that was one thing that I came across in my research that I didn't actually think of, because I think of coffee and caffeine synonymously, and I think of coffee as safe. But on the Mayo Clinic article also, it just said, just a note, these two are not equivalent, caffeine powder and caffeine pills. And just like any drug, you can overdose.
Yeah, I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that my thought is that when it comes to coffee, again, consult your doctor, but I think that the amount you would need to drink of coffee is so high that it's pretty much not
I think
a
it's
concern
like
at all.
200 cups or something crazy.
Which is nuts.
Right.
But obviously, if it's in a concentrated form, that's a different story. Like in a pill or in powder. One kind of fascinating observation that I came across, and we've kind of touched on it with the Age of Enlightenment and these great thinkers drinking coffee, is so. As Dre said, around the time of these revolutions, coffee was introduced. So it was starting it reached Vienna via some Turks in Turkey around 1530. And Michael Pollan, who's a famous kind of food author, he was claiming that the introduction of coffee into Europe is the reason for a lot of these explosive, creative time periods in human history. His reasoning was that before, a lot of people, to drink something that was safe, were drinking beer because the fermentation process would take care of any like dangerous bacteriums and things that would exist in the water. And so once coffee came in, people could start drinking coffee instead of beer, because obviously the boiling and things like that would kill the bad things. And so it was this like switch from people being tipsy all the time or buzzed all the time to people being like hardwired and ready to go. And then and so that was his argument. And I don't know if it is the sole cause, but I do see a lot of, just a lot of those kinds of trends in what we've been talking about, which is cool.
I'm picturing like an Enlightenment commercial, which probably didn't exist, but bear with me, where it's like someone trading in their beer for a coffee, and like the music is like, I can see clearly now.
Yeah, I can only imagine because the Western world's drug of choice was beer. You wake up, drink beer. Doesn't matter how old you are, drinking beer all day long. So of course, yeah, it's a depressant. We all know how alcohol works. Like, makes you a little silly, makes you a little sleepy, makes you act on impulses a little bit more. Whereas
damages your liver.
Damages your liver, right? And of course, coffee/caffeine, it's a stimulant, and we all know why in the most neurotic nation to ever exist, perhaps, in modern America, why we drink it, right? We're workaholics. We want to go, achieve, build. And I do believe that coffee did play a huge part in the Enlightenment. I do believe that shift from drinking beer at breakfast to coffee at breakfast helped a lot of these thinkers think clearly. And we can see there's a lot, like we've already mentioned a couple times now, these coffee houses that became hubs for leading thinkers, revolutionaries. I can't remember what the major stock exchange place is in America, but that started as a coffee house. Mm-hmm. A lot of these amazing, reputable organizations, and so the Royal Society out in the UK, which Benjamin Franklin and a lot of the most, Thomas Jefferson, Isaac Newton, they're all a part of this. That started as a coffee club. So honestly, if you follow the coffee bean trail, the coffee ground trail, I definitely think that's a really, really, really essential part of coffee, and of the Enlightenment history. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely changed when you were like, was it you who offered up coffee? I was like, oh, I'm going to be railing against it, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. I don't care about this one study I saw 5 years ago that kind of made me think. And I kept researching. And I'm like, man, all these studies, and to your point, and to Poole et al.'s point that I mentioned earlier with the meta-analysis of 201 studies, there is a limit, right? So essentially every number that I saw was saying 4 to 5 is good, and maybe about 4 is the sweet spot. You're going to get the most benefit.
4 cups.
4 cups of coffee is the sweet spot where you're going to get the most benefit from the stimulant effects and any sort of like neurowiring stuff that might prevent some things, unless you're pregnant. Don't drink it if you're pregnant, they said. But you won't hit where it can really start damaging you, really. And one of the biggest things too is that, like you said, it affects, and like everybody kind of knows, it affects your sleep. So a lot of the deleterious effects of coffee are that they ruin your sleep, which of course, if you're not sleeping, then a whole slew of health issues can come following that. And that is really getting me thinking, because I was like, obviously I am a creator, or I like to fancy myself that, more of a consumer, unfortunately, at this point in my life. But I want to write books, and I want to create podcasts and do great things with my brain. And I've known for a long time that most of my favorite writers, most of the prolific writers that I've fallen in love with, are addicted to some substance. A lot of them cocaine, a lot of them cigarettes, and a lot of them coffee. And these things have one thing in common, is they make you go. And while some of my energy as I'm approaching 30 has definitely decreased, I'm like, man, there's just so many nights where now it's 10:30, 11, maybe midnight, where when I was 8 years ago, I could just push through done whatever I need to do until 3 a.m. Now I'm like, man, I'm really crashing and I'm waking up tired and this and that. And of course, a lot of these things can be remedied with a better diet, drinking water, better sleep. But at the same time, that's not really how our lifestyle works in America. It's go, go, go. It's sacrifice. It's sleep when you're dead. And Michael Pollan, the guy that Aidan brought up a few minutes ago, who has done an extensive work on food, and that's led him into some of these chemical compounds that are related to food, caffeine, magic mushrooms, etc., THC, etc., etc. He posed a question that I've always kind of. So he posed the question: is it wrong to be dependent on caffeine? Is it wrong to be to have this symbiotic relationship with this caffeine where it's kind of the smartest drug of all time because it's the most popular beverage in the world besides water. Maybe tea might be second, but it's either second or third. And I also saw a stat that it's like the number one commodity besides crude oil. So it's like coffee, the plant is like the most successful plant of all time because it's like it found the most intelligent, most kind of affordant creature, made it fall in love with it, made it dependent on it, and then reproduce it all around the world. Like coffee is not going to go out of style anytime soon.
Same goes for corn, cats,
That's
dogs,
true, corn, yeah,
cows,
right.
yeah.
So whatever they did to hack
Species.
our psychologies, like they did a fantastic job. And Michael Pollan's just saying, hey, is this an issue? If this brought us out of the dark ages, if this brought us into the world of enlightenment, into the safest place to ever exist. And obviously, as I'm reading these studies, I'm asking myself again, what is it that I have against coffee? Is my ego, is my idea that I want to live a life off my own passion as opposed to expedite my success with this drug that I can take 4 servings of per day and be okay and probably be a better version of myself? Should I be worrying about, I'm not me without coffee. Me without coffee, you guys, who you guys are as people, is coffee. Like it's coffee drink. I'm not saying that's who you are, but I'm saying like that's a part of you, right? If you took the coffee away, you guys would be different people, right? Grumpier, like a little bit whatever, more tired, right? Or am I wrong?
Oh yeah.
It depends. I mean, there are days that I like conscientiously decide I probably once every 6 months do a coffee cleanse for 2 weeks, and like maybe the first day.
Mm-hmm.
And now more I'm getting into like once a week or twice a week trying to do a coffee less day, and then I'll have tea instead. But I mean, yeah.
Tea instead.
I
Still
caffeine. Have caffeine.
A little less. Yeah. Yeah, I think so there is one thing to point out about your hesitation, and it seems like kind of a common thread throughout us that we have all had kind of this thought that we do not want to be so reliant upon an external is so the Arabica plant, which is accounts for a huge percentage of coffee sold worldwide, is according to some climate models, the range of that plant is decreasing. So the amount of like area that is conducive to the plant growing, suitable to the plant growing, is reducing because of the rise in temperatures, and because it can only grow in such specific conditions. They call it the coffee belt. So like Brazil is a huge producer, and Ethiopia and Africa, and there's a few other countries, Colombia, that are also super producers of coffee. But one of the fears of climate change is that there will be less and less coffee available, and coffee at more expensive prices, or not at all, maybe someday, which is a quandary in terms of the, like, have we built a society that is so dependent on coffee? Like, can we do the things that we do without coffee? I don't know. So that's just one thing that I think is something to consider in terms of the coffee addiction that most people have.
So within our lifetimes, we're probably like we're probably okay. Maybe prices will rise, which I don't like this argument for other reasons. But if we're thinking of coffee only, I think we should do everything we can to save the environment. But like if we're thinking of coffee only, we are probably okay. But the next generation or the next generation, so like maybe we don't let our kids drink coffee so that they're not addicted by the time they're
I don't even know. I think it'll be in our lifetime. I mean, depending on how things turn out and how much change happens, it could be in our lifetime, which is
that it's gone.
That it's super expensive probably to obtain.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
But like probably not gone.
I'm not sure that
Crazy.
I'm worried about that. Like they'll just have caffeine in some other form.
Mm-hmm.
Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is the thing where it can't help accept the idea that the reason why people like coffee is because of caffeine. I don't think that without caffeine, coffee would have blown up in this way. It's the effect that is making us fall in love with it.
Yeah.
And then over time, we just like, okay, like this bitter taste, it's okay. I can make some cream in it and do that. So for me, obviously personally, I don't give a damn, but also as a species. Now, if you're going to say caffeine's going to go out of existence, then I might be a little bit worried.
Where do the caffeine pills come from?
Yeah, but you think that they're not going to? I understand trying to mass grow all mass produce all these coffee beans and all that, but are you saying that they won't even be able to synthetically or anything replicate this?
I think so.
This?
I don't know, and I don't know. But I think that aren't caffeine pills produced from the decaffeination process of caffeine?
Possibly.
I'm pretty sure that's
there's
the
a lot
case,
of things that have coffee.
I also don't know.
Yeah.
Or caffeine in it though. Chocolate.
That's
tea.
true. Yeah.
So I'm not as concerned about coffee per se going out of business. Also, I think that they'll just they'll genetically engineer some sort of different bean that can grow in some sort of environment. Maybe it won't be grown like it is today, but it's similar to how there's people who are trying to combat climate change and the effect of cows on the environment by growing lab-grown meat.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna find some sort of way to change this process.
I hear you. I also hear you. However, I'm hoping you can potentially put a pin in it because one thing that you had mentioned earlier was the effects of caffeine. Well, we've been kind of talking about that, but you specifically were talking about like feeling less tired, and I think the science of it is super fascinating. So the reason that you guys don't get tired when you like consume caffeine or consume coffee is because there are receptors in our brain, and a lot of times people make like a Y shape. And when we get tired, our body releases little molecules that will come and like bind to those receptors, and coffee will block that. And so when it's bound, that's what tells our body that it's tired. So what coffee does, it comes in and it blocks it so that your body can't, like the receptors can't find any of the molecules, so it doesn't know that you're tired. So you might have a ton of little tired molecules floating around in your brain, but they can't find that receptor to bind to because the coffee is inhibiting it, right? It's blocking it. It's called competitive inhibition. And what our body does then to compensate for that is it literally creates more receptors in your brain. More tired receptors, so that hopefully these tired molecules will find the receptor, right, and bind. And the fascinating thing is there hasn't been a ton of research beyond the fact that as of now, there is no known upper limit. So if you keep consuming caffeine, your body will just keep putting tired receptors in your brain. And so that's what puts that crashing effect, right? If you're a person who drinks 4 or 5 cups of coffee, maybe even 2, and then you end up forgetting it, or you leave the house too early, whatever it is, and you have like a headache. I mean, yeah, if you can imagine, you have all these extra receptors that are built to know when you're tired, and usually a good portion of them are blocked with caffeine. But then all of a sudden you don't have caffeine to block. So you have all these receptors exposed, right? Like that, I think, is a little bit, unnerving, like thinking about some of that science. But as of yet, there are no known negative health impacts of the increase of receptors in your brain.
Yeah, that isn't a problem that I've thought about. I think largely because in all the research they haven't,
Right.
yeah, it hasn't become a problem yet. But it sounds like it sounds terrifying for
It
sure.
does, like
How can that not be a problem?
I mean, I guess, yeah, you just keep blocking it, but that's also then the reason why you'll have a tolerance, right? You'll end up like
Right.
feeling like you need 2 cups, and then you're at 3 cups, and then you're looking back on your life and you're like, oh my God, like I drink so much coffee.
I didn't see anything on like caffeine fasting. If you fast for a little bit from it, do they just start to reduce and then you can just bump back up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's that's similar, I think, with many other drug pathways, but do your common science research, common scientists. Have you guys heard, I'm kind of all over the place, any other comments on science? Otherwise, I have a question.
No, the only thing I have to say is the receptors is adenosine. That's all I know.
Awesome.
Yeah. Caffeine imitates adenosine. So.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. So, for Dre, have you guys heard of free trade coffee?
I have heard of it. Yeah.
Have you heard of it, Dre? So this was the other area that I ended up looking into a little bit because I have a sister who's adopted from Nicaragua, and there is some coffee production in Nicaragua, and my first experience there, I was exposed to some of the worker conditions, which were less than ideal, but I think still met whatever requirements needed to be met for the plant to be functional. And this is the case in many, many other coffee production places around the world. If you look into like how workers are compensated or treated, and also even how much the industry, like how much of the profit is maintained within like the coffee plant or within like the workers, a lot of it ends up elsewhere with like the people who are processing the beans and then repackaging them in Starbucks packaging or whatever. So I was wanting to see if there was something that would help me know if I'm responsibly consuming coffee in like a more ethical way, in a way that was better supporting like worker wages and compensation and fair trade essentially. And yeah, I came across the like fair trade coffee, and it's kind of a landmark now. There were 3 major companies, I think, that merged to make it what it is today. It came out of a statute from the United Nations that was refined like several times, but I didn't realize that like the trade of coffee was talked about at the level of the United Nations. That was so fascinating. But then also that there are labels of coffee that say like free trade certified, and then you can hopefully be consuming coffee that has a goal of better supporting like local workers. So that was an area of excitement.
Yeah, you should look out for that stamp. This other stamp, I'm not so sure. I'm not so convinced. So there's this special coffee that goes for $500 a pound. And I learned about this on reviewing Dre's upcoming essay. And so there are these elephants that will eat coffee beans. And in Thailand, they will they eat these coffee beans, and the coffee beans go through their stomach, and it goes through this fermentation process, and then they poop them out. And the coffee beans, after they've been pooped out, apparently have a unique flavor, and people will go and harvest it and sell it in these super fancy restaurants in like across Asia and all these countries. And it's because of this like fermentation process that they apparently become fruitier and more flavorful. And I thought that was just a unique niche of coffee for sale.
When you say it's $500, what do you mean, like per pound?
So US $500 per pound.
That is pretty remarkable. I think one of the most famous versions of that is like the Balinese palm civets that do it. Like in Bali or in Indonesia, they have like a lot of these palm civet farms, which a palm civet, I can't remember what type of animal it is, but it kind of looks like this kind of tree cat looking thing. I guess cats can climb trees, but long tail kind of looks like a cat. So they do the same thing. They eat the cherries, the coffee cherries. Yep, coffee's a cherry if you didn't know. I didn't. And then, their gut biome ferments. And if you don't know what fermentation is, I'm sure you heard of it, but I think I can do it justice. So fermentation is essentially an anaerobic process controlled or propelled with like enzymes as the catalyst, or I guess enzymes are catalysts that break down whatever the material is, whatever the chemical compounds are. And that's as simple as fermentation is. And it just so happens that fermentation gives us a lot of amazing byproducts like alcohol and coffee.
Cool.
But so they do the whole fermentation process, poop it out, and they make a ton of money off of it. And when we were in Bali, we had the opportunity to go to a coffee farm, and we ended up passing on it because we were actually on a super long, well, not super long, but like too long of a drive from, I can't remember what this area is called, but it's like the Cancun of Bali all the way to Ubud, which is into like this forest of Bali, this jungle. And they're like, oh, do you want to see like these super cool civet farms? Or like we do this magical thing with coffee, and the coffee's like $100 per whatever. And I'm like, okay, I don't really like coffee, but it sounds kind of cool. We ended up not doing it because our drive was just too long. And now I'm like, I don't know, probably not vegan, so I probably wouldn't do it again. But we did get the coffee this time around because we didn't think about it. So I have had the poop coffee.
You have had and is it better than regular coffee?
Was it as shitty as it sounds?
Yeah, good one. I see. The thing is like I feel like Em loved it. I don't like coffee. I might be one of these super bitter tasters. So to me, it was pretty nasty. I was like, I felt bad that I wasted like the $20 sip. Yeah. And I didn't get to like enjoy and bask in her poop coffee. But yeah, these poop coffees do exist, and apparently there is some, like you said, a lot of these amazing flavors that come through going through the gut of elephants and palm civets. And I don't know if at any point someone is in like the backwoods of America eating coffee beans or cherries and fermenting their own coffee. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
If you're a coffee guru and you're offended right now, sorry. It's probably not called shit coffee, but it sounds cool.
It is what it is. Any other fun facts about coffee?
Gosh, I don't know, but I think we've covered quite a bit.
Yeah, we've covered quite a bit. There was one thing that popped up that I didn't bring up when I was mentioning the stages in life when I became a coffee addict, especially a coffee addict since I am today anyways, was when I was studying in Scandinavia, and they're amongst the highest coffee consumers, and we would have like a coffee with breakfast, and then there was fika, which is their word in Sweden, specifically their word for coffee and a pastry, like combined. And so we would have fika around mid-morning, and then you'd have coffee with lunch, and then you'd have afternoon coffee at like 3:00. And so that was the daily routine. And so it's also hypercultural as far as how much coffee people will drink. And I wasn't so familiar with that. And just thought I'd toss that in there.
Yeah, thanks for tossing it in. Well, common scientists, next time you get your kick through coffee, maybe you'll think about a couple of these fun facts that we shared in this Common Science cast. If not, it's all good. For those elephant poop coffee drinkers, maybe you can shout out on the YouTube and let us know what it's actually called and why you like it. Otherwise, we will see you guys next time.
Hey, Common Scientists. Hope you enjoyed the cast. Thanks for investing in common science. We hope it brought as much value to you as it did to us.
To learn more, smash the subscribe button and visit our website, commonscientists.com, where you can read our blog, join our email newsletter, and follow us on social media.
Finally, if you like what we have to say, you can absolutely support us on Patreon. We could always use more support. You can navigate there also from our website, commonscientists.com, common scientists with an S, so that we can continue cultivating a community of common scientists.